Hello, welcome to the Being Whole podcast. I am not Dr. Cassandra LeClaire. In fact, I am Katrina. I am the podcast manager and producer for Dr. Cassandra LeClaire, and today she has asked me to interview her about a huge change that she has recently made in her life, and not only how she felt leading up to the decision, but also how she feels after making the decision. And it's kind of a big announcement. Like, it's a really big moment for her. And I'm just so honored that I get to do this for her and share the news with you. Without further ado, let's dive into this episode with Cassandra. What is something that you do to shift your day? Like, if you're having a rough day?
Okay, what is something I do to shift my day if I'm having a rough day? Okay, I do dance it out. So, but when you ask, like people ask, like, well, what do you dance to? It's always the most random songs. So I just like to hear music and just kind of like shake my body a little bit and get rid of some things. So that's one thing that I do. Another thing that I think is really helpful is if you're able to just step outside for a minute, if you feel overwhelmed, like that is helpful to me. But obviously that's not always possible. So sometimes it's really just like taking a deep breath, trying to recenter myself. That's really, for me, a lot of times when it's overwhelmed, it's physical overwhelm in addition to emotional overwhelm. So it's really recognizing that that's what's happening for me. And that's why I think that the dancing does help, because it's also just kind of releasing some of like the tension that's going on inside.
Yeah. And how does your teenage son react when you decide to dance it out? Does he dance with you?
No, no. In fact, this is why a lot of times I go drive and dance in my car, or like drive and like, you see me sitting at stoplights dancing, or I've been known to sit in the garage with my music blaring. And I got in trouble from Kellen like a few years ago because my trap music was shaking the house. I had it on too loud. He was like,
who are you?
No, Kellen is non-participatory in that event.
One day he will appreciate it, I'm sure. So I have to say, I feel like your energy is like next level. Do you feel like this is true for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the last several months, I've just been kind of like building up and building up and building up. And all of a sudden I feel like I'm this like sparkly little butterfly emerging from this cocoon. So yeah, definitely emerging into and stepping into new spaces that has me kind of feeling a lot different.
It's so good. I can always tell when we get on Zoom and I'm like, oh, but this time I'm like, yes, I'm here for this.
Yeah,
So
like it's weird, but I feel like my eyes even look sparkly. Like,
yeah.
I know that sounds a little weird, but like I feel like I have a sparkle in my eye. And like when I walk, even I'm like, oh, I feel like springier. Like
Yeah.
and it's so funny because people who have seen me, like people are asking me like, oh, have you lost weight? Are you like, what happened? Did you get a facial? I'm like, no, I'm just being awesome.
Just a magical being, okay?
Yeah, it's like the Lego movie, with that song, everything is awesome. I'm like
Yes.
walking around like that right now. It feels real good.
I feel like that's quite a big change though, from like 6 to 8 months ago for you. Like, how were you feeling every day back then?
Well, I mean, I think like honestly, if I look back at the year of 2021, it was a harder year for me than 2020. And I don't know if a lot of other people experienced that. Maybe in 2020, things were like, oh my gosh, this is the pandemic and now our lives are upended. And then by 2021, it's like it seemed like we should have things figured out. And for whatever reason, that was a big shift space for me. I felt like a lot of transition. So in that transitional space, there was also a lot going on. My daughter was a senior in high school, so there was constant thinking about the future and what she was going to do. And even working at a university, you're always future thinking. You're always planning for your course. You plan it out the whole semester, or, we know what we're supposed to teach like years in advance almost kind of thing. So it had me constantly just like, what's the next step? What's the next step? And I've always known that that's kind of like a mindset thing for me. But what that was doing for me then with my business, because I also, in addition to being a professor, I do speaking and workshops and online courses. And so what it was doing for me is almost creating this like sense of urgency too, of like, okay, what's next? What am I going to do? It's the next step. I can feel it. I'm supposed to be moving forward. And I was feeling stuck. I was feeling that need so much, that want to do it. It was like that place in me was even more awakened. When Alex, I think, was like thinking about her next steps, it got me even more invigorated to be like, yeah, what are my next steps in a different way? And I think it kind of broke open some areas that I really needed to push through in terms of, recognizing why I felt stuck.
Mhm. Um, I love that. And I honestly think that 2021 was really like a things are going back to normal, but I'm not comfortable with that because I don't like how I was previously. So like I'm ready to mold into something new, which was hard.
Well, and what I really realized, I'm not all my listeners know, not everyone knows my complete story, but my job at Texas State has shifted a lot over the years because before I got sick, I was on a tenure track line and then I had several years off. And when I came back, I'm in a different role. And the role that I currently occupy there is it's there's not a lot of room for professional expansion and growth in terms of moving up the ladder and things like that, and even financial compensation. And what I realized of being home, especially I think, when I was teaching online that year, is it really made me realize like how I love facilitating my students' growth. Like that is like why I love them so much. Seeing their growth in the ways that they transform in the semester. Every semester is like the greatest feeling for me. And I get to do that work alongside with them. I'm always doing their journals and I'm doing that work beside them. But I noticed then as they're like, planning their next steps too, just like Alex was, like I'm seeing them go and reach all these things and achieve these things. And over the years, they have been my biggest champions. They're the ones who are like, LeClaire, why don't you do a TED Talk? Hey, LeClaire, why don't you write a book? So they've been pushing me. And what I realized is that I love that. I want that. And so I kept trying to find that in different ways. And that's kind of why I pushed so hard in my business to really open up this new space. But what happened then is I would feel that in certain areas, and then I would come back to work at some ways in Texas State and not feel that and feel stuck, or feel like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm opening up these spaces for my students, but where are these spaces for me? And like, where do I feel valued, or where do I get to grow now? And what I realized in 2021, and I had these thoughts before. It's not like it just came about in 2021. And that's what I really want to say. Like, I had these growing thoughts. It just kind of became clearer to me that I wanted to be in spaces where I could grow more easily without feeling like I was trying to just continually search for something that I was never going to get, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so what did you do differently to spark your excitement in 2021 that maybe was like, okay, I can feel the ball moving. I feel like I'm making forward movement. Was there anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was really proactive about it. This is what I think is really important in any situation. If you're feeling like, unrest, or if you're feeling like stuck or stressed out or whatever, like, sit with that, of course, for as long as you need to kind of let yourself understand what's going on or seek help with that. But then for me, it was really like okay, but I don't want to be in this place anymore. And I do journal a lot. I keep a lot of notes for myself, or I'm looking back for things. And so I kept coming across notes I'd written in my phone from, like 3 or 4 years ago, saying the same kinds of things that I was feeling.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So this isn't just like a pandemic unrest. This is like actually my attitude. I was like,
yeah.
oh shit. Okay, I got to look at that a little bit. And and so what I did then was I tried to shift that. I was like, okay, if I feel this, I'm going to find different ways that I can grow there. And so I kind of like dug back into like, different groups and organizations. I made a bunch of different friends across campus again. I dug into, just a different program at Texas State. And so I really wanted to try to open up different spaces for myself to see what that felt like.
Mhm.
And the cool thing that happened for me is I made a bunch of connections and met a bunch of new friends, and really, really also helped me see the different ways that I can utilize and capitalize on all of my talents and gifts, even if my role is no longer at Texas State or no longer in that classroom in that way. And so, what I really did over the last year is ask myself some hard questions, like, what do you like? How often are you complaining about your job versus how much do you like it? And what are you going to do about it? And this is something where, this is what I do with my coaching clients. So I really had to do it on myself. It's like the want to versus the willing to, or this is what I say I want, but what am I willing to do about it? And it became this space where I could feel it in meetings, or I could feel different places. Like the space I feel alive is in the classroom with my students, but like every place else, I was getting frustrated and I was getting angry. And then I'm becoming like the toxic person somehow because
Mm.
I'm pissed, and so like really being honest with myself about like, okay, what is that? And what can you do to change that?
Mm. And I think that the hardest part is like listening to the answer, because so much of us whine and complain, and then it's like, yeah, but like there's more work to do instead of just, saying, I don't like this, I don't like that. It's like being open to receiving the answers.
Yeah. And I really started to also pay attention to the ways that other people were talking about things too. And it's like so often, unfortunately, right now in education, it is a really draining space. It's people talking about how burnt out they are, and then I step into this other space where I'm getting to create and be and enjoy this process of other people who are like dreaming and getting excited. And so I really was feeling like a difference in shift. And, that's not fair. That's not like oh, this is happening and that's why academia is terrible. It's definitely a symbol of like what has been happening to educators, like, with the burnout and just feeling like you have increased pressure with fewer resources. All of a sudden the emotional labor for a lot of people, the emotional labor in my job has always been a little bit different because I teach classes about emotions and we do journals. But for a lot of people in education, they had to take on more, of that educational labor and caring for their students than they've ever had to before. And it is exhausting and draining, especially if you're not used to that. So I think like I really noticed a shift in the ways that people were even like excited to be places and things like that. And that wasn't like a big reason for me to leave or anything like that, but it really was something too where it's like, okay, can I change this system? What can I change? And there were a lot of things that I just didn't feel I could change, or that I have more control or more ability to change things in other areas for myself, I
Mm.
guess.
Yeah, that's so good. Would you say that your yearning to grow in other spaces helped you push through the mundane frustration every day?
I think like that having this other passion, having this other thing definitely. And the cool thing for me is what allowed me to realize that I had that other passion is my job at Texas State, like the part of my, you can see it when I start talking about it, right? My students, like stepping into that classroom, being there with them, teaching my content is like I all day every day.
Mhm.
It's my favorite space. So like recognizing them, like, okay, I can take this space that I love there and I can do this elsewhere without some of these other frustrations that are maybe creeping in, or without some of this other, financial stress that I feel. Because that's the other thing, it's like people don't want to talk about money, or it gets weird to talk about money. And I'm tired of that. It's like any other topic. Those conversations don't get easier because we ignore them. So pretending we don't have to have conversations about financial literacy or your bank account or debt or what salary you should be paid or equality or whatever. Like that's complete bullshit. We need to have those conversations. So a
Mhm.
big part of this stress and strain and me wanting more for myself was also wanting financial growth. And it took me a really long time to be able to say that and admit that, because I felt icky saying I wanted more money, especially when I think like one of the favorite things people in education do is like, then it's like, oh, but your students love you or you're so helpful. So then it's like, you almost feel like icky for wanting more money. It's like, oh, you're right. And then finally I had to get to this point where it's like, yeah, but they love me because I'm good at my job and I deserve to be compensated for that. This isn't just some like service I provide. And so it was really even like understanding that it was okay for me to talk about money. It was okay for me to ask for more. It was okay for me to be like, this is not okay what you're paying me, or whatever it is. And that, you can, I don't know how much attention people can pay to my voice, but I can feel my voice getting shaky. I can feel my
Mhm.
heart rate going up even when I say those things, because it was such an uncomfortable space for me to like really even go in and ask for more money or to try to fight that, or then be willing to walk away from stable income because I feel like I value myself in a different way or I want something more for myself.
Yes. So much yes. And you feel like it's totally different for women educators than men, correct?
I do. I mean, I think that unfortunately, and this comes from a lot of me teaching gender communication and everything too. So I hope people can understand that this isn't just, random opinions I'm always spouting off either. I've researched this and I've looked into it and I've taught classes on this. And, one of the biggest problems with the pay gap, of course, too, starts at the very beginning. Like women aren't necessarily taught how to negotiate, how to ask for more, and how to be assertive in those conversations. And that's where, again, that comes back to learning how to talk about money, learning how to ask other people, hey, what do you make? That's not a dirty question. It's like if somebody doesn't want to tell you, or if the company doesn't want you to know, like, okay, let's look at that then.
Yeah.
And don't be mad at the other person because they make more than you. They didn't, like if somebody makes more than me, like good for them. Like if my boss is going to offer me more money, I'm going to take it too, right?
Yeah.
But then instead really understanding the structures and the systems of like, why is that? Or is this a problem across the board? Or is this something that comes up in other areas? And for me too, it was, the money of recognizing that it's okay to be in a helping profession, because that's what teaching and education is, and to still feel like you deserve to be valued and compensated in a different way.
Mm.
And I talk to educators and everybody is so, we get weird talking about money
Yeah.
because it's almost like you're conditioned to feel like you should just be so, but your schedule or but this, and like you should just be so grateful. And for me, especially, being a single mom, the pressures of trying to, raise two kids or what have you on whatever salary and constantly thinking about it, that was energetically draining. So again, back to, you asked like what needed to make some of these shifts. It's like really asking myself, okay, you spend a lot of time thinking about this. You spend a lot of times being frustrated about this. So much so that you think about getting another job, or you do have another job. So the reality of it is like, I'm a very educated and well-credentialed person, and there are a million other jobs that I can do, right? So if I'm going to complain about this and I'm going to say this is an issue, but I'm going to stay in it, again, being honest with myself, that's a choice. And
Mhm.
so leaving means a different schedule, leaving means a different, whatever, but like really being honest with myself of, okay, but what choice are you going to make?
Yeah. So hard. So taking all that into consideration, how you were before, how you were feeling before, how are you feeling now and why?
Okay, so yeah, I guess we kind of like danced all around a bunch of different things that kind of really didn't answer all your questions properly,
You're
Katrina.
good.
I'm
No,
so
you're good.
sorry. So yeah, the big shift, I guess, for me, or the big like news or what's happened kind of in my life that a lot of people have been asking about is I did recently resign my position as a senior lecturer at Texas State University. And it won't effective at the end of this spring semester. And I right away, of course, told my students, because that was the sad part. And I did that so I can step into my own business full time, and I can devote that time and energy and attention. And since I've made that choice, like so many things have happened energetically for me. Just even leading up to that decision, and I finally was like, no, my business is my business. Prior to that, I'd kind of been like, it was my side hustle that maybe one day would take over and then I might leave my job. So like really when I made the decision of like, no, I'm leaving Texas State. Now this is my business. Even that like mindset shift of like, okay, so what does this business look like every day? What are the projections? What is the schedule? What does this look like? So like that was the start of it. And then when I finally like, made the call and went in and said the words, uh, I didn't even realize the weight that I was carrying. Actually saw somebody kind of higher up, much higher up than me at the university after I had resigned. I saw this individual and they right away were like, oh my gosh, you look different. and
Mm.
they could recognize it. And then I was able to talk with them even about like my new adventure and leaving the university. And I have to say, like, that was even really cool to be able to like, hey, I went to my boss, quit, have this elated feeling of being like super overjoyed. I feel magical. But then I had to go right into this another meeting with, an administrator for all practical purposes. And she was so awesome to me in terms of just like really wanting what was best for me. And I'm saying that because that's what empowerment looks like to me.
Mm.
Empowerment to me is like, you go, like that was what was good for you. And that is the best choice for you. And we will miss you. And that is sad for us, but I'm happy for you. And that I think is something where I'm so excited because I know that that's what I do for my students. And to hear somebody do that for me, even though I was like, I'm like leaving, felt like really cool. And the cool part about that then, honestly, is that has been just the continued response. And why that feels so good is because I didn't need it.
Yeah.
I felt so good about it. This is one of the first decisions where after I made it, I called you, there was no but. There was no, oh, but I'm worried about money. Oh, but I'm worried about this. It was just yep, this is
Until
what's
it is.
happening. And I know this is my path.
Mm.
So then for everybody else afterward to just be like, yeah, that's a great choice. I mean, people literally are saying like, that's a great decision, Cassandra. You left a stable job with insurance and retirement benefits to go out into the unknown with no with no stability. Great choice. Like
Right.
that's how much of a difference. Even my psychiatrist, I was like, hey, yo, I quit my jobs. I'm not gonna have insurance. We might need to figure that out. She was like, good. So I feel different, and everybody else around me obviously can feel it too.
Like I don't see you walk, but I can imagine that you do definitely have a pep in your step and like a zest to wake up every day.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
honestly, it's fun because I feel like I think that's how I walk around campus. Like after I get out of class, you can always tell when I get out of class. Like I literally feel like I glide across campus.
Mhm.
And now I just feel like I'm gliding all the time.
Oh my goodness. Like a magical unicorn or something.
Yeah, for real.
Fully embodying it. So congratulations
Thank
again. I mean, I've told you, but I'm just so proud of you for like how far you've come in the short amount of time I've known you. It's like only been a year. It's
you.
crazy.
Yeah.
But I've seen your mindset shift. I've seen you kind of tackle those inner thoughts and the inner rewiring like it's a piece of cake, even though it's really hard. But you're like, no, like I'm working through this and I am going to get to the other side of this. I know that there's a
Mhm.
future for this path. And I'm inspired for sure.
Well, and I
Um,
think that that's one thing that was kind of like, understanding that I was working through those things. And then for the last like few years, people just saw me working really hard. My friends are
mhm.
like, oh, you're working all the time. You're working really hard. And some people got it more than others. Some people understood like what I was trying to do or what I was working for. Other people got frustrated. And so even really being able to like go through that and understand why I was moving forward and not allow like what other people felt to like derail me. That was something that was like a really important part of the process that, as you know, too.
Yeah. People pleasing is really hard, especially when I'm sure in an educator's role, it's like everyone is looking for you as an example
Mhm.
of like pleasing everyone. It's
Well,
hard
and
though.
like too, like what we talked about, it's like I started to really realize how other people's fears come up when you make big
Mhm.
decisions, or like when you tell, like I started to recognize, the number one thing people ask would say is like, oh yeah, but what about insurance? Or what are you going to do about retirement? Or, oh, that's scary. And so I really started to listen to those narratives, of like, oh, this is other people's things. These are the things that other people are worried about. Do I really need to be worried about them? And I know I've told you this over and over, but like the question I just kept finally asking myself, when that shift was happening is like, is this real? Like, is this real? Is this fear that I'm feeling real? And is it something that I'm worried about that I can work through? Or, what is the real obstacle here? And just even really being able to understand some of those things for myself in a different way was transformative.
Mm. I love the example you're setting for all of us. So I'm amazed. What are you most excited about in this new chapter of being your own boss?
I think just that I do get to have more control. The cool thing about academia is that I did have a lot of control over my classes and how I taught them. And you kind of are your own boss in a little bit of a way, you're in your own container. But there's still like just that, again, I wasn't sure like where I could grow, and I'm excited for growth. Like, it's cool to me that I can create these new classes and I get to decide what goes in them. What I'm honestly most excited about my new classes, or about the stuff I get to do, is that I had incorporated a little bit in some of my classes at Texas State with some of my outside trainings. But you also got to stay in your lane in the classes that you're teaching, right?
Yeah.
And now in my outside work, I get to really embody a lot of these other trainings that I've had and these other certifications, so it's not me doing breath work and mindset training and some of those other things, that mindfulness that I'm certified and qualified to do, or talking about yoga poses. Those definitely, I would argue anyone who came up against me, that they still had a place in all of my classroom teachings. But it's nice to just be able to incorporate those things in a different way. I'm excited about that. And I'm just really also excited to continue to create the life I want to live. I'm
Mm.
excited to just, not have to explain myself in different ways. And again, I'm very lucky. Academia is a lot different than many other professions. I did have a fairly flexible schedule. I was working online, so this isn't to like vilify my previous space, but it's really about the mindset shift for me. It feels like somehow I am more control over all of these things, and even the idea of like, oh, okay, yeah, so I'm going to have my class start this time. Maybe I don't want it to start in August. Maybe I want it to start or whatever. So it's stuff that just, again, it's a lot about like me getting to choose how I want to grow, as opposed to feeling like there aren't spaces for me to do so. And I even should, put a caveat there, spaces to do so where I'm going to be compensated for my time and energy.
Yes. Which is very important.
There were a lot of things I could have kept doing. And there were a lot of things over the last few years that I've stopped doing. There's tons of service opportunities. There's always a club you can be in charge of. There's always something, right? And I did that for a really long time. And I love that space. I absolutely love it. But again, as I talked about the money piece, being burnt out and frustrated and stressed and resentful about money, and then doing all of these extra things where you're not being compensated for, is like not a really healthy space.
No.
It's just breeds burnout and resentment for sure, 100%. So my long-winded answer to your question is like, I'm excited that when I choose to do extra things, it's because I'm going to choose to for my growth, or because I want to, or because, it's something that's going to help me beneficially in whatever way, or because I just really want to help people, as opposed to feeling like I'm chasing some carrot on a stick, or moving up some rung on some imaginary ladder, or getting some line on my vita. And like, that was the other thing I really had to question with this, or I think comes up a lot in academia, is ego. Like, it feels important. It feels important when I tell people like, oh, what do you do? I'm a professor. Like, you can see people's face change, they're like, oh, and so even understanding like, okay, what about this is my ego? How much of my job is just that I feel good because I feel important?
Yeah.
Like, and being honest with yourself about that too. And I think like a lot of times too, we make situations okay because we're like a little puffed up about it, or we feel good about it. But so it's really recognizing like, okay, but why is that what felt good to you? Or do you really need that? Or is that actually what fuels you, or what have you? And so I just started to realize that, again, like, back to everybody else's fears, or the things people were asking me, people would tell me that was a big fear, especially of other academics. Like, aren't you, but being a professor and having the university behind you, or all these your resources as university, you should really hang on to that. And so that was a big fear of mine for, as for like the whole last year. It's like, oh gosh, I should just keep my business on the side, stay here because it is prestigious and, whatever. And so really recognizing that like, okay, but I'm still me with all my degrees and with all my education, with all my words,
Yeah.
regardless of my title. So like, that is my ego then, if I need it to be about my title. And I was very clear with myself, like, okay, well, then I don't need that. I
Mm.
don't. So yeah, just a lot of mindset work, all of it. That's what
Yeah.
it was.
And I think that the thing that I'm most excited for you is to see you be able to have the mental rest when you want it and when you need it, and let yourself really connect with that flow of creativity and inspiration, where before it was like, I just have so much going on calendar wise. Even it's like there's so much I have to do every day, every week, every month, that like I don't have space to do the things I want to do more.
Yeah, the coolest thing has been, looking at my calendar now and knowing that there's like going to be blank spaces. There are just like blank spaces. And for me, that's so huge. Before I had to make them. I always made the spaces. It's like, here's when I'm going to go paddleboarding. Here's when I get to go for a walk, or here's when I breathe,
Yeah.
So I always made the spaces, just like I preach. I do that. But for me, as somebody to create something or to write or to really drop in, I need big chunks of time. That's what I prefer. And it's hard for me to get it. That's why people always wonder, I have a lot of people who get mad at me. They're like, oh, why didn't you invite me paddleboarding? Or why I would have went camping with you. It's like, I have to go do those things so I can get big chunks of time, so I can drop in creatively, so I can turn off my brain. So it's like, even now, this last week, I actually did stuff with friends more because I felt like, okay, I'm still going to get to drop into all of these other spaces and see my friends. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because before it almost felt like I had to choose, and that's where, again, I'm really lucky that my friends understood what I was choosing. Like, I'm not choosing work over you. I'm choosing building this dream right now. Thank you for loving me through this. Thank you for being here and understanding that this is what this looks like, because there is another side to it. And
Mm.
so that's why it also feels good. And that's why it's so cool. Like, all my friends too, they're like, yeah, because they've been waiting for this space,
Yeah.
to have this space with me.
Mm. It's so beautiful to witness. So on that note, like, what is something that you want to do more of, or something that you want to try this, next chapter that you haven't really embraced?
The mindset shift for me too is just anytime I would work on my business, I would think about how I should be working on Texas State, or anytime, so it's just like the idea that I won't have to have that push and pull is really nice. But also I'm just really, really looking forward to being able to breathe a little bit more in terms of looking at my own calendar.
Mhm.
Like, when I would look at my calendar, it would stress me out like every day. And not because I was like choosing to fill it up, or not because, but just because of the sheer volume of things that I would need to do every day.
Mhm.
And so I still have a major list of things to do. I mean, being your own boss and, building these things is not like, oh, I'm just going to get to go hang out every day. But it's the idea then that, some of the things and some of the structures and some of the timelines, again, I get to manage in a different way, I think, like, is really exciting to me. But beyond that, you've already seen me do it, just really being able to feel okay with, like, okay, yeah, absolutely. In the afternoons, this is this time where I always have this little dip. So I'm going to keep, instead of, I used to just take a little walk or take a lunch break. Now I'm going to use that dip. And that dip becomes my time for myself that then feeds into creative time. Because, like, what I realized more and more is, like, when I have too many things going on, and I think this is true for a lot of people, you can't always play with your brain patterns the way
Mhm.
you want to. And so this sounds really kind of weird, probably, or silly, but I'm excited to play with my brain patterns, Katrina.
Oh
I'm
my goodness.
excited to, a lot of times if you don't want to do something, you start doing another task and then you bleed into that. When I have too much stuff on my calendar, I can't follow the natural flow of my own ADHD brain. So, like, I'm excited to just follow the flow of my brain and to,
Oh,
oh, this is what I need right now. I need to step away from the computer. Oh, this is what I need right now. So I'm going to go do this, as opposed to, like, oh God, I have to be on Zoom for 6 hours today or whatever.
yeah, that doesn't sound as inspiring.
Yeah. So
But I'm excited to like hear about the inner workings of your brain. It's weird to say, but it's true. Hmm. So maybe, do you have any words of advice for people that might be feeling like you did 6, 8 months ago, speaking from like the other side of the coin?
I think that, if we're thinking about like career shifts, or maybe it's not even career shifts for people, maybe it's just a big jump. For some people, that might be a move. Maybe it's a relationship shift. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's becoming an entrepreneur, whatever it is for you, right? Is like, it's always great to ask advice. Like, I have always been a person who has solicited multiple opinions. Like, that's just who I am, like questioning, really taking in, thinking about it. But then it's also like recognizing where other people's voices end and yours begins, or where you need to stop other people's voices, or and recognize then, like, okay, I have absorbed all of this information, I've taken all of these things into consideration, but where am I in it? And continually coming back to it, because nobody else is in your bank account, nobody else is in your head every day, nobody else is living your life. So I think, unfortunately, what happens is that people, myself included, it can feel like all of those other fears then are real, and can feel like there is no escape and there is no way out. So, like, for example, even the money thing, that was a huge thing for me, as I've discussed. Like, I have huge financial triggers. Some of that data, it's back to my abuse. It's from childhood. It's deep. And I am in the scarcity model with money. I did have to cash out all of my retirement when I got sick to pay for medical bills. I've been on disability, like, I know what that's like. So when I thought about like the idea of not having a consistent, stable paycheck necessarily all lined up, like that just appears in my account with me not having to go call people to work for it, right? When I thought about like, my retirement match being gone, like initially, yeah, that's terrifying. And then you talk to people and like, that's the fear, right? But then I sat and again, I asked myself, I'm like, okay, but is this real? And the reality of it is I know how to make money. I've had a job out, my parents owned a business, and then I had a job outside of that since I've been 14. Like, there are a million different things I know how to do. So like, even understanding that the ability to make money, the energy behind that wasn't real, so that's even something, just like really getting clear on where your resistance coming up, and then asking yourself like how to get through that. What does that really look like? And what obstacles are you presenting and putting there, because it is a fear versus what is actually real. So
Mhm.
that was huge for me, and it's something that now I just continue to do. For me, it is the question, is this real? Maybe for you it's a different question or a different way to get at it, but it was really helpful for me to sit and think about those things, and to think about like, okay, but what would happen? What would I do? Oh, okay, well, I could sell this, I could do that, I could work. And then, you realize there are actually all these solutions.
Yeah. And there's so much support too. I feel like when you embrace people around you who really truly want to see you succeed and feel happy in life, then it's like, okay, I do have people lifting me, right? That's
Yeah.
hard to do though.
Well, and it's like the fear is sometimes it's other people's fear, and it's sometimes their worry for you because they do care about you. Obviously, a lot of my close friends and family, they asked about the insurance for me because I do have an incurable disease. Like,
Yeah.
I actually have a chronic illness. I have 12 specialists. This is a real concern, like, so it's really then, but for me, again, understanding, okay, yep, I've been without insurance before. I've had Medicare. I've had different things. So what would this look like? What are the obstacles? How can I move around this? What would this like, but not allowing that to be the end answer. Oh shit, I have this incurable disease. I have to stay at my job forever so I can keep these doctors. Like, that's not real. Like, it's just not. And so even understanding that for myself, and really just being transparent then with other people, and being like, I appreciate your concern, or I understand it, or telling them like that, I'm sorry, that's not true for me, or whatever it was, or nodding and smiling, or in Texas, we say, bless your heart, or whatever
Totally.
it is. But like, really understanding that I only need to subscribe to my own narrative, and I'm in control of that.
Hmm. Well, any final thoughts that you want to say for this episode?
I think I'm just really excited for the next chapter, and I'm so thankful to everyone who has been here for me as I've kind of transitioned, the last few years writing my book, doing the TEDx talk at Texas State, and really understanding too, what I want to do. And I want to keep having students and inspiring them. And I'm just going to have students in a different way on in a different platform. And I think that, anyone who's kind of questioning any kind of shift is, again, really look at what that would do for you and look at what that means for you. And for me, I was thinking about it every single day, and I had been for years. So, if anything, now that the decision has been made, I have freed up so much energetic space for myself that I actually get to think about other things. And that's what you see on my face. That's what people feel. That undercurrent of just thinking about a major decision is now gone because the decision has been made. So I think like really, asking yourself how long you're going to keep yourself in that space. And I tortured myself with it for far longer than I would recommend anyone to actually do.
Mhm. Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much for letting me do a podcast takeover today.
Thank you. It was fun. It was exciting to talk to you in this format. And I will see you again
Yay.
soon.
Thanks for
Thanks,
listening, guys.
everyone.
And by the way, since I'm her podcast manager, if you could just rate and review this podcast, that'd be really great.
Yes,
Share
thank you,
with a
everyone.
friend.
Katrina is my podcast manager. She is awesome. She helps me with all the things. She's responsible for the graphics and the quotes and basically everything that looks cool, Katrina does. So thank you so much for being here. And also, to everyone who's listening, I hope that you do have people who can help walk you through this process. Katrina has been somebody who's been here with me week after week with the ups and downs of, really moving through and shifting and getting to a space where I could transition into new things. So thank you, Katrina, for all that you do for me. Thank you for being here. And again, thank you to everyone who's just been here supporting me for a really long time. I appreciate you.
I just love you.
I love you too.